Keevan.
Avery Brown.
Lola Wagner.
Kaden Roder.
Allison Dunn.
Over 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. This is according to Sarah J. Bloomfield, who has a PhD in education and is the chief leader of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and a publication, the Holocaust Encyclopedia in 2023.
Everyone in this room is aware of the tragedies that occurred during the Holocaust, but not everyone understands that the foundation of it is still prevalent today.
The Holocaust was a tremendous tragedy, the root cause of which is still present.
To begin, we will talk about the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany. Then, we will talk about the segregation leading up to the Holocaust.
Next, we will talk about the concentration camps and the additions there. Then, we will talk about the liberation and the trials that took place afterwards. And finally, we will discuss how anti-Semitism is still present today. First, we will discuss how Nazi Germany came to power and Hitler's involvement. Hitler's rise in authority allowed him to grow the Nazi Party significantly. According to John Manswick, who has a PhD in European history and has been a professor at Troy University for 29 years, in the Journal of Psychohistory published in 2022 states, in November 1921, Hitler became the leader of the largest German party known as the DPA. Soon after becoming in charge of the party, he changed the name of the party from the DPA to the Nazi Party. While becoming in charge of the Nazi Party, he also became in charge of the party's financial status, which allowed him to clear his back taxes he had owed. He further directed tax policies to subsidize families in order to promote the rebuilding of the German population. Throughout the next 12 years, Hitler used many forms of propaganda such as radio interviews, marches, and speeches to attract citizens to his party. Nazi propaganda idolized Hitler as a gifted salesman who brought stability, created jobs, and was there for the better of the German population. After the 1932 presidential election, the Nazi Party was the largest party in all of Germany. Party involvement rose from 2.6% of the German population in 1928 to 43.9% by 1933. On January 30th, 1933, President Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler Chancellor of Germany. Hitler was not appointed Chancellor of Germany by an electoral vote or a popular mandate, but because of a questionable constitutional agreement amongst a small group of conservative politicians that had given up on parliamentary rule. Upon Hindenburg's death in 1934, Adolf Hitler assumed presidency, which he combined with the chancellorship to become the Führer or Reichsleiter. Nazi salutes then became a normal everyday practice that happened in schools, in the streets, in grocery stores, and all public places. Hitler created programs such as Hitler Youth, which conditioned children to believe and accept all of his ideologies that he had previously created. He wrote these ideas in his books and published these books, which were called Mein Kampf and Swedish Bush, and he also talked about them in all his speeches throughout his time in power. Within 2 years, Hitler and the Nazis outmaneuvered conservative German politicians to create a Nazi dictatorship completely subordinate to Hitler's personal will. Now that I've talked about the rise of Nazi Germany and Hitler's involvement, next I will talk about the segregation of individuals leading up to the Holocaust.
In 1933 through 1934, the Nazis started limiting participation of Jews in everyday German life. In September of 1935, they created the Nuremberg Laws. These laws showed the radical Nazi theories. These were very strict laws. Some of these laws were if you had 3 or more grandparents that were Jews, you were considered a Jew, no matter what your religious background was. It also was that no Jews could go to any German hospitals. In 1937 through 1938, Nazis upped the segregation of Jews and made them identify themselves, overall separating them more from the German population. Some of the ways they did this was they made Jews register their properties, they also dismissed them from their jobs, and their businesses were taken over by German people of origin. Also, in 1938, Jews were no longer allowed to doctor any German people. On the 9th through the 10th of November, 1938, or the Night of the Broken Glass, Nazi forces upped the segregation of Jews from the rest of the German population. Some of the ways they did this was they made Jews live in more ghetto and rundown areas. This was stated by Natalie Aluskin, who is a Harry Rich professor at the Holocaust Study at the University of Florida, in the book Conscious History, published in July of 2021. Some of the other ways were they were not allowed to go into certain German areas called Aryan zones. These zones, if they went into, they could see up to 6 months in jail. This was stated by Victoria Van Orden, who has a PhD in history at Lincoln Pong University in Sweden, in the journal Witnessing a Divide in September of 2021. They were also not allowed to attend any schools or universities. They also were not allowed to go to any cinemas, theaters, or sports facilities. In 1939, Nazi leaders commanded a more radical persecution of Jews. January 1st, 1939, Jews, men and women with the first name of Jewish origin, were forced to add on to the end of their first name either Israel or Sarah, so they could be more easily identified. Also, they were forced to wear a J on their clothing, so when the time for the separation came, they could easily separate. Now that I've talked about the segregation before the Holocaust, I will move on to the camps that occurred during the Holocaust.
Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its allies established more than 44,000 camps. There are 5 different types of camps: concentration camps, forced labor camps, transit camps, prisoner of war camps, and killing centers. All concentration camps were structured the same way. In 1933, the first camp, Dachau, opened. In some camps, Nazi doctors performed medical experiments on prisoners. In 1943, Auschwitz became a concentration camp. The reason for epidemics and contagious diseases that prevailed in the Auschwitz concentration camp included the dreadful living conditions, stated by Mitchell Bard, who has a PhD in political science from UCLA, in a publication for Jewish Virtual Library in 2018. In Auschwitz I, prisoners lived in old brick barracks. The overcrowding forced basements and lofts into use as living quarters as well. The prisoners received 3 meals a day, morning, noon, and evening. Order of the day was strictly established, where prisoners spent over 10 hours working, and the rest was taken up by long roll call assemblies, lining up for food rations, or a place in the washroom. At first, prisoners were shot to death in the pits near the camp from 1941 to 1943. In 1941, executions were also carried out using poison gas. At the Auschwitz camp complex, the Birkenau Killing Center had 4 gas chambers known as crematoria. During the height of deportations to the camp in 1943 to 1944, an average of 6,000 Jews were gassed there each day. Over 2,772,000 Jews were murdered at killing centers. No one who came out alive of a German extermination camp can ever forget the picture that greeted them at Auschwitz. The smoke of the crematory hung over the camp, and the air was full of the nauseating smell of burning flesh. Stated by Gisela Perl, who was a doctor at Auschwitz, in the book I Was a Doctor in Auschwitz, and the publication for Lexington Books, published in 2019. Now that we have discussed the atrocities that were Nazi camps, we will share the processes of liberation and post-war reparations.
Releasing prisoners from concentration camps revealed several challenges for former inmates and the world. Freeing inmates from concentration camps revealed the Nazis' barbaric practices. According to Michael Berenbaum, who received a PhD from Florida State University, in an article published by Britannica in 2020, US, British, Canadian, and Soviet troops worked to free camps, provide food and medical support, and collect evidence for future trials. What these troops found, according to Jason Dossie, accredited with a PhD and current research historian at the Jenny Craig Institute for the Study of War and Democracy, in an article published by the World War II Museum in April 2021, was a most dreadful stench and rows of bodies stacked like cordwood. Andrew Kinnery, a member of the 45th Evacuation Hospital, said, "I can't really describe it, how horrendous it was to see these people treated like animals, even worse than that." Kinnery also supervised Germans who were brought to the camps so they could never forget nor deny the obscenities that occurred at their hands. Despite their efforts, more than 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were murdered during the Holocaust, and the liberation process took nearly a year. Following liberation, survivors struggled to rejoin post-war communities, often familyless and facing still present anti-Semitic attitudes. Some 7 to 9 million people were displaced post-World War II. According to Danny Dayan, the chairman of Yad Vashem and former Israeli consul general in New York, in an article published by the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in 2023, Jews attempted to return to their country, many in vain attempts to reconnect with their family, only to find their homes filled by strangers. Out of both anti-Semitism and fear that they may reclaim their possessions, Jews were attacked, forced out, or killed. In Poland, a once heavily Jewish country, 1,500 Jews were killed in the first few months following liberation. Trials, such as those held in Nuremberg, sought to bring justice to the horrific actions displayed by the Nazi officials. At the Nuremberg trials, 22 major Nazi officials were tried for war crimes, crimes against the peace, and crimes against humanity. From 1945 to 1949, only 31,000 of 100,000 active Nazi war criminals were tried. Many fled to Argentina, one of few countries adopting both war criminals and victims alike. Now that we have discussed the liberation of concentration camps, we will talk about how the root cause of the Holocaust is still present today.
Anti-Semitism is still very prevalent in the modern day world. According to Jonathan Greenblatt, was an MBA from Northwestern University and a publication for the Anti-Defamation League in 2023. In 2022, there were over 3,697 anti-Semitic incidences in the United States. This was a 36% increase from the previous year. These incidents included vandalism, harassment, and assault, and was the highest on record since the Anti-Defamation League began tracking in 1979. However, it wasn't always like this. In the years following World War II, anti-Semitism was on decline. Part of this was because of Hollywood films, which sent the message that anti-Semitism was unacceptable and un-American. Signs that prohibited Jews from entering public areas began to come down. And many polls showed a sharp decline in the amount of people who objected to having Jews as neighbors. Many asserted that anti-Semitism was becoming a more fringe belief. Unfortunately, according to Greg Johnson, who has been a senior writer and editor for 15 years, in a publication for Penn Today in 2022, recent events have led to a resurgence in anti-Semitism. One of these events was the COVID-19 pandemic. Historically, Jews have been vilified anytime a new disease has come about. An example of this is in the 14th century, when while the bubonic plague ravaged Europe, many Jews were accused of poisoning wells in order to spread the disease. Unfortunately, this attitude has not changed with the passage of time. And as the COVID-19 pandemic closed its grip around the world, many Jews were accused of creating and spreading the virus to advance their own means. Celebrities have also helped spread anti-Semitism. One celebrity was Kyrie Irving, a professional basketball player who posted a link to an anti-Semitic film on his social media. The film questioned the legitimacy of the Jewish faith and also denied the facts of the Holocaust. It also cited many notable anti-Semites, including Adolf Hitler. Another celebrity who has helped spread anti-Semitism was Kanye West. He did this with a number of anti-Semitic statements, many of which invoked a number of conspiracy theories. The conspiracy theories included that Jews were trying to control the world or that they exploited others for financial gain. And Kanye West also praised Adolf Hitler. These statements have been linked to 59 distinct anti-Semitic events, each of which directly referenced Kanye West. Another factor that has helped spread anti-Semitism was Israel's invasion of Palestine. Now, it should first be noted that criticism of Israel is not the same as anti-Semitism. However, it becomes anti-Semitism when it is directed towards Jewish people or institutions. This type of anti-Semitism occurred frequently on college campuses, with an example being when the building of a Jewish campus organization was vandalized with anti-Israel graffiti.
First, we discussed the rise of Nazi Germany and Hitler's involvement. Then we talked about the segregation of individuals leading up to the Holocaust.
Then we talked about the concentration camps that took place during the Holocaust. Next, we talked about the liberation from the camps and the war trials. And finally, we talked about the lasting impact the Holocaust had on the world.
The Holocaust was a tremendous tragedy, the root cause of which is still present.
Over 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. More than 6 million lives were lost due to ignorance and intolerance.
Understanding the history of what happened is imperative to ensure that it never happens